Hello, you join me as I try to look for life in the Project Benly.
For the more observant of you, you'll know that I've managed to find a starter solenoid rubber. Very pleased to find that, because it's the sort of thing that always perishes and ends up in the bin or just mislaid. I was quite pleased to find that. When I first got into restoring bikes, I was always absolutely petrified of wiring, and realistically it's not all that bad in a bike of this era. I mean, if we grab that, we can pretty much see where everything goes. There's the red, which goes to the red, and these two connect to the there and there. It's quite simple, realistically. The only caveat to that being, of course, providing no one else has been in there first. I had some fantastically terrible wiring when other people have been in there wiring beforehand. You do have to wonder. In RT's headlight, I came across two wires that were taking live feeds directly from the battery, but going absolutely nowhere. That was quite an interesting one. Just rattling around in the headlight with two miscellaneous live wires. Anyway, I'll go ahead and I'll quickly plug this in, and then we'll get the battery on.
So, that's the starter solenoid in and the battery plumbed in. Now there's no TV jeopardy here because this is YouTube, but this is the first time I've turned this key. So what we're looking for is some signs of life. And we have it. Well, wait a minute. We did have it. We had a neutral light, and now we don't. That's a bit ominous. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? I think something is wrong. Now I'm wondering if we've blown that fuse for some strange reason or another. Indicator was on, which it should not have been. But now we don't have a neutral light. I don't think there's much point in checking for a spark after that. I think the next step will be to check that fuse. Well, that was unexpected. The fuse has indeed blown. It was the correct grade, so all being well, it was just a dud. I'm going to go rummage around in my spares stash, dig out another one, and I'll have another go. New fuse in, neutral light shining brightly, things are looking promising. So let's go down to the side of the engine and see what's what. Benly comes with both electric and kickstart, and as I've only got one pair of hands, I'm going to use the starter button. That's of course bear in mind if it works. Let's see what we get. We get a starter motor working and a starter solenoid rather working away as well, but unfortunately we don't appear to have a spark. It's a bit disappointing. Let's try and get that at a better angle for you to see, but to my viewpoint there was no spark coming out of that at all. I do know this spark plug actually works. I've tested this. This is my tester spark plug. Right, let's have another go. Nope, unfortunately we have no spark there. Well, that wasn't as successful as I'd hoped. Sadly, no spark. I do suspect that the fault lies with the ignition coil, given that the bike's been sitting for, as far as I know, 28 years. Perhaps not surprising. They're not too hard to replace or that difficult to come by. The Benly has a single twin pot coil mounted underneath the tank to the left hand side of the frame. As you can see over my shoulder, I have removed the tank off of camera to give me access to replace it. I've got another coil in the stash, but I've never checked that it's got any life in it until now. So that will be the next step, and if it hasn't, a quick trip to the Bay of E should source another. In removing the tank, I did discover, unfortunately, there is some detritus in it at the bottom, which I couldn't see with it mounted on the bike. So in a separate video, I will give the tank a good clean before that goes back on. Anyway, thank you for watching my slightly unsuccessful video, and I hope you'll join me next time for my second attempt. Good evening and welcome to the bonus footage that they hide in the end credits, but this time on the Benly project. Now, when the fuse blew, I was at that precise moment turning on the headlights. Now, whilst I did check earlier that doing so didn't cause the blowing of the fuse, I didn't do that on camera, which might have been a faux pas. So there's the ignition and there's the headlight, and we are all hunky-dory. We do, however, have a blown side light bulb, which leads isn't too onerous. We also have removed the indicator relay because, as I'm sure everyone will have seen, there was a bright orange light radiating out of there, which should have been blinking, and blinking along with the indicators, but there was no blinking at all. The relay, which is down here, looks like that, so perhaps not surprising. It took an alarming amount of time to get the connectors off as they were completely corroded onto it. I did also check that the bulbs were fine, and they are, which brings me neatly on to my top tip of the evening that I'm sure absolutely everybody knows, which is if you're working on a bike of this era, and a Japanese one at that, you'll need a set of these, which is JIS screwdriver, or Japanese Industrial Standard. Whilst the screws on these bikes do look like Phillips head screws, they're not, and if you were to use a Phillips head screwdriver, you would destroy them. So if you are going to work on one, get yourself a set of those. I also noticed down here this interesting arrangement with this plastic strap and this air, where in fact we should have a bracket that looks remarkably like that. Obviously this probably would have worked, as I'm going to assume this was the last coil on the bike when it was last on the road, but obviously when we put it back together again we'll be doing it properly, which will be for another video another day, ahead of course the big strip down and the very much needed cleaning.